Welcome to the Indiana Department of Child Services Case Process Overview. The Indiana Department of Child Services, or DCS, protects children who are victims of abuse or neglect, strengthens families through services that focus on family support and preservation, and administers child protective services throughout the state of Indiana. DCS protects Indiana's children from further abuse or neglect and prevents, remedies, or assists in solving problems that may result in abuse, neglect, exploitation, or delinquency of children. DCS does this by partnering with agencies, communities, and families to provide safe, nurturing, and stable homes for our children. DCS established the Indiana Child Abuse and Neglect Hotline to ensure the consistent handling of calls alleging child abuse and neglect. The hotline serves as the central reporting center for all allegations of child abuse or neglect in the state of Indiana. The hotline is staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with specially trained family case managers, known as intake specialists, who are professionally trained to take reports. These intake specialists gather information from callers, determine whether the information provided meets statutory criteria for DCS to conduct an assessment, and, if appropriate, route reports directly to the DCS local offices for response and assessment. Professional report sources will be given the hotline's recommendation before the conclusion of their call and may be entitled to some information about the status of the report. However, all information is provided confidentially. If you call to make a report, an intake specialist will ask you for information about the circumstances creating a risk of harm to the child, including who was involved, what occurred, when and where it occurred, the extent of any injuries, and any other relevant information. When making a report, be prepared to provide information about the child, such as name, date of birth or age, or address. You will be asked about who cares for or lives with the child, who you think committed the abuse or neglect, and what happened to the child. Don't worry if you're unable to provide all of the information listed. If you suspect a child is a victim of abuse or neglect, make the call, and an intake specialist will review the information you are able to provide to determine whether it meets the requirements of the law for DCS to initiate an assessment. Do not wait for someone else to make the call. Your report may be the first report on the child, and it could either back up a previous report or add to it, or your call may be the critical first step in protecting a child. Under Indiana law, any individual who has reason to believe a child is a victim of abuse or neglect has the duty to make a report. Therefore, each citizen of Indiana is considered a mandated reporter. While reporting child abuse is everyone's responsibility, Indiana law requires some in certain occupations to do so. These professional reporters are staff members in a medical, public, or private institution, school, facility, or agency. These reporters are legally obligated by their profession to report alleged child abuse or neglect. In those agencies where there are established reporting protocols, a report may be made to an individual in charge or another designated agent. This person also becomes responsible for making a report, and it does not relieve the first individual from their obligation unless they are certain a report was made. The hotline will accept anonymous reports, but make sure to call if you suspect abuse or neglect, as failure to report can be a Class B misdemeanor. Everyone has an important role and responsibility to prevent child abuse and neglect. Children need everyone to stand up for their safety when they may be in harm's way or when families in crisis or turmoil need support from those close to them. By contacting the Indiana Child Abuse and Neglect Hotline, if you suspect a child is a victim of abuse or neglect, you can play your part in protecting a child and or making it possible for the family in crisis to get the help and support they need. The intake specialist will document the information provided during the call and will review the allegations with the report source. The report is then transmitted electronically to the DCS local office in the county where the allegation is believed to have occurred, with a recommendation to either assess or screen out the report. The terms child abuse and child neglect are defined by Indiana statute, and DCS will not assign a report for assessment if the allegations do not meet the statutory definition of abuse or neglect. If the report does not meet the Indiana guidelines to assign for assessment, it is referred to as a screen-out. Each county has a process to review screen-outs and may decide to assess the report based upon their review. If the allegations in the report are found to meet the statutory definition of child abuse or child neglect, the report is assigned to a local family case manager, or FCM, who is then responsible for initiating and conducting an assessment of the allegations. All DCS assessments will be initiated within the following timeframes: within 1 hour if the allegations would cause a reasonable person to believe that the child is in imminent danger of serious bodily harm, or within 24 hours if the allegations involve abuse but the child does not appear to be in imminent danger, or within 5 days if the allegations involve neglect, there are no allegations of abuse, and the child does not appear to be in imminent danger. Assessment timelines can be overridden to shorten the time to initiation, but cannot be lengthened. Assessment means an initial and ongoing investigation or evaluation by DCS that includes a review and determination of the safety issues that affect a child and a child's parents, guardians, or custodians, or another individual residing in the residence where the child resides or is likely to reside. Assessments identify underlying causes of the safety issues and include a determination as to whether child abuse, neglect, or maltreatment occurred. During the assessment, the family case manager will talk to the report source, parents, and family members, the child and siblings, any witnesses to the alleged incident, or anyone who might know more about the family. The assessing worker will also visually examine the child and take pictures of any visible trauma or obtain pictures taken by other professionals or law enforcement. The family case manager will view the home and the place where the alleged abuse or neglect occurred and assess for the safety of the children and determine any protective factors that may be present. The FCM may also contact the child's medical provider or school personnel to gather pertinent information. They may also arrange for any necessary examinations with professionals for evaluation and obtain other needed documentation while conducting the assessment. This may include evaluations such as a medical assessment for the child or substance abuse screens for the parents or caregivers. The FCM, after supervisory review and consult, will make a determination of the needs of a child's family in order for the child to remain in the home safely, be returned to the home safely, or be placed in an alternate living arrangement. DCS will make a finding of substantiated when facts obtained during the assessment provide a preponderance of evidence that is sufficient to lead a reasonable person to believe that child abuse and/or neglect has occurred, or when the alleged perpetrator admits to having abused and/or neglected the child victim. Cases that are unsubstantiated are those cases where the burden of proof could not be met. If the assessment is found to be unsubstantiated, the case is closed and there is no further involvement by DCS. However, DCS may provide the family with referral information for local services. A child's safety is the main concern of DCS, and their actions in response to a child abuse or neglect report are always based on the child's safety. There are several levels of possible DCS intervention once an assessment has been completed. If the assessment is unsubstantiated or the child is safe and further DCS involvement is not warranted, a community services referral can be made to the Community Partners for Child Safety program. The purpose of this program is to provide a secondary child abuse prevention service that can be delivered through building community resources to provide a collaborative prevention network throughout the state. The program provides home-based case management services and connects families to resources to strengthen the family and prevent abuse and neglect. If the assessment is substantiated, an ongoing DCS case is open to provide more formalized services. The ongoing case is either an informal adjustment case, in-home CHINS or child in need of services case, or an out-of-home CHINS case. DCS will initiate a program of informal adjustment, or IA, when a child abuse or neglect allegation is substantiated. Voluntary participation in family and/or rehabilitative services is the most appropriate course of action to protect the safety and well-being of the child. The parent, guardian, or custodian consents to the IA, and the juvenile court approval is requested and obtained. An informal adjustment case eliminates the need for coercive intervention of the court and alleviates safety concerns for the children. The duration of the IA will be 6 months, although an extension of the informal adjustment agreement may be requested for no longer than 3 months. Services provided through the IA agreement are generally home-based and are paid for by DCS. DCS offers services to families that include home-based and individual counseling, therapy, education programs, substance abuse treatment, anger management, and domestic violence programming. If the parents are not compliant with the agreement or if the safety risk of the child is elevated, DCS may request the intervention of the court and file CHINS proceedings. The state of Indiana defines a child in need of services as a child prior to his or her 18th birthday who is experiencing one or more of the conditions such as abuse and/or neglect, and the situation is unlikely to be remedied without the coercive intervention of the court. DCS may file a CHINS petition, the highest level of intervention, for children and families where the risk level is high or very high, and coercive intervention of the court is needed to assure the child's safety and well-being. The child may stay in the home or be placed in substitute care. The court monitors the case, including the case plan and permanency goal. Consequences for parental noncompliance may include, but are not limited to, the child being placed in out-of-home care, and in the most extreme circumstances, termination of parental rights. If the assessed safety of the child and protective factors indicate the child can remain safe in the home, an in-home CHINS case may be opened. Physical custody of the child will remain with the parents or caregivers, while legal custody is given to the state. Services to the family are ordered by the court, provided to the family in the home, and monitored by DCS. DCS will also continuously assess child safety and report to the court during hearings held every 90 days to ensure compliance. If there is no workable plan that can be put in place to ensure the safety of the child, then an out-of-home CHINS will be filed. In this type of CHINS, both legal and physical custody are given to the state, and the child is placed in substitute care, such as foster care, or in most cases the child will be placed with an appropriate relative. Placement for the child is determined through DCS practice called Child and Family Team Meetings, and with the help of the Child and Adolescent Needs and Strengths, or CANS tool, which is used to document and communicate the strengths and needs of the child to assist in determining the appropriate level of behavioral health services needed for the child. Services to the family are ordered by the court and monitored by DCS. The court is updated and hearings are held at a minimum of every 90 days. 6 months after the child has been determined to be a child in need of services, DCS will begin assessing whether the current permanency plan for the child is appropriate. An out-of-home placement should only occur when all other means of safety have been considered and offered, when the children are at imminent risk of placement, or the non-offending parent is unable to protect the children or will not accept services. The certain harm done to a child when removed from his or her family must be weighed against the risk of harm that may result from the failure to remove. Child and family teams are teams made up of the parents, the formal and informal supports chosen by the family, the DCS family case manager and supervisor, the guardian ad litem or child advocate if appointed, and any providers working with the family. The purpose of these teams is to bring together all of the stakeholders in the creation, implementation, and follow-through of the plan towards safety and permanency for the children. Child and family teams may be utilized to develop safety plans for the children, identify needed services during a case transfer or transition, in the development of case plans, to help develop or revise permanency goals, and at case closure. The Child and Family Team Meeting model encourages a strengths-based approach to initial and ongoing assessments of children and their families, and focuses on the underlying needs of the family rather than behavioral symptoms. The child and the family's identified strengths play an essential role in determining what interventions might be most successful. DCS is required to identify and recommend to the court a permanency plan for every child adjudicated as a child in need of services. The permanency plan is the intended permanent or long-term arrangement for care and custody of the child. The permanency plan may include any of the following goals that the court considers most appropriate and consistent with the best interest of the child: reunification when the child is returned to an appropriate parent, adoption when parental rights have been voluntarily or involuntarily terminated, legal guardianship or placement with a fit and willing relative, or finally another planned permanent living arrangement for children who are older and will remain in the custody of DCS until they age out of services or are otherwise emancipated. DCS is required to make reasonable efforts to reunify the child with his or her family if a temporary out-of-home placement is necessary to ensure the immediate safety of the child. However, there are certain instances where DCS is not required to make reasonable efforts to reunify. The court may find reasonable efforts are not required due to certain criminal convictions, prior involuntary termination of parental rights of a sibling in a CHINS, or the child having been an abandoned infant. A DCS case is not closed until safety, stability, and permanency have been reached for the child. DCS is working on several new initiatives: permanency roundtables, assessing for protective factors, and Safely Home Families First, meant to facilitate safety, permanency, and well-being for all children involved with DCS. DCS is committed to obtaining permanency for all children in need of services who are in care, and will ensure that providing appropriate care and finding permanent homes for these children remains a focus in case planning. A permanency roundtable is a team of DCS permanency and service experts that come together in a very structured setting to review options for a child with uncertain permanency. The intervention is designed to facilitate the permanency planning process for these youth placed in out-of-home care by developing an action plan and identifying solutions for obstacles to assist the child in attaining permanency. Parental strengths that prevent and reduce the likelihood of abuse or neglect include 5 protective factors. Interviews and discussions with the parent or caregiver are used to establish their understanding of child development, their ability to provide the support and/or nourishment needed to help their child develop, assess the connection or affection between the child and parent, and the parent or caregiver's ability to put his or her knowledge into practice. Healthy family functioning is demonstrated by the ability of a family member to openly share positive and negative experiences and come together to accept, solve, and manage problems on a day-to-day basis. Each family develops a manner of communication and response to problems that provide clues to their functioning as a group. This group continues to experience change through the life of the family, so the family's response to change and/or problems is important to discuss. Exploring the family's current and historic functioning and response to problems can give you a clearer picture of the family's resilience. Social connections are the friends, relatives, and neighbors that provide social and emotional support to the parent and/or child. Concrete supports are the tangible goods and services available to assist the family in coping with stress. These supports are things as opposed to individuals, and these supports increase in importance during times of crisis or intensified need. Safely Home Families First is a natural evolution of the DCS practice. It is the renewed and heightened effort to keep kids safely at home or with appropriate relatives. By identifying those protective factors that will help keep a child at home safely, or by quickly locating relatives in the event a child is not able to remain in the home, and ensuring that those relatives and family members are able to find resources and their own informal supports, DCS is able to better provide for the well-being of our children. If you have any doubts or suspicions about whether or not to report abuse and/or neglect of a child, call the hotline at 1-800-800-5556.